is happening, y'all? This is Drake Allen. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Cold Beer and Whitetails. We're on episode number 2. Thank you for everybody who subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that. Coming at you with all outdoor material, mostly whitetail and archery hunting. First of all, cheers to everybody out there. I'm drinking another Coors Light, as I like to call them, Diet Coors. Don't know if I mentioned this to you in the last episode, but this is my favorite beer. Cheers to everybody out there. Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about mock scrapes. And to be honest, how I kind of approach mock scrapes is before I ever put one on a property or think about introducing one even in a particular area, I'm going to walk that land through and through so I know where major travel corridors are. So when I do lay that mock scrape down, I'm certain it's going to be used, you know. And when I do lay that down, I anticipate them using it within days, even that night or the day or two after. So the first piece that is laying that down in an area where we know they're going to be moving through. You know, it's not just a matter of putting a mock scrape up or doing it quickly just so you can feel like you've got a couple on your property, but mainly getting them in areas that we know for certain are coming through. Like I like to do it specifically on deer paths in the woods. I don't really care to do it on field edges because at that point we're out, we're in social mode, we're in at the cafeteria mode, as I like to say. We're at the bean field, clover field, the cornfield. They're there eating. Their focus is on eating and socialization with other deer. I like to do this in staging areas, which can be in corners 10 to 20 yards in a cornfield or a bean field, or on a creek bottom funnel where we see them just beating down travel paths. The reason why I like to do that in heavy travel areas is because they're certainly at that point going to come through and stop and pay attention to it, mainly lay down their pre-orbital scent, which is that area between their antlers and basically where on a human is their lymph nodes. And so what they'll do is they'll come in and do that and lay that down. You won't particularly see them rubbing in the area, but more so laying their scent down, or you won't even see them necessarily pawing. When I do see them pawing, it's typically pawing the ground, I say, for anybody out there, and kicking up dirt. It's typically between 2 to 4 weeks a year, what I like to call the rut. And a lot of people tend to think that a mock scrape is probably only used then, which is totally not the case. I've seen them used year round because that's how much point of communication is going on there, and how much they check into that. I mean, quite frankly, it serves as a calling card and directs deer movement in front of you rather than kind of just being in a tree. And even if you do know there's deer movement there and hoping they walk by your tree. I mean, and one of the biggest things I've seen, I should say, biggest mistakes I've seen is making certain that your killing tree is within 20 to 25 yards of your mock scrape, and you've got a clear shot at your mock scrape. So it's not just a matter of getting a camera on your mock scrape, or it's not about and seeing what's coming through there, which is great. I mean, this is great for inventory, guys. I mean, you could put this down in the middle of April, May, June, and July and see what's moving through. But the reality of it is that's when I particularly say you're killing your deer. So if you're putting your work in by putting your mock scrapes in those time periods, and you're staying out of there as August, September, and October comes around, well then they're going to be using that on a regular basis instead of you introducing it in September. I mean, they still will do it, don't get me wrong, but at that point I want it rolling. I want a dominant buck laying that scent down on a daily basis or an every other day basis, depending on what his pattern is, to come through and show whether it's his territory or he's checking on does or he's checking to see if another buck's in the area. Regardless, that's when I'm laying it down, is in that springtime area. And guys, when you hang these things, they'll be good year round. Throughout this episode, down here in the right hand corner, I'm going to show you pictures of mock scrapes that I've set up, pictures of bucks that I've got on camera, and towards the end of the episode I'm going to tell you more about my experience with killing bucks in mock scrapes, and I will show you pictures of bucks literally moments before I took their life in front of a mock scrape. So I mean, it's changed the way I hunt. It's completely changed my style. My whole orientation is around mock scrapes because I am an aggressive hunter who I'll dive into this next episode, but I'm a saddle hunter, so which gives me the ability to be mobile. And with that being said, I can get deeper into places. I set my mock scrapes up in places that are a bit more aggressive. Now, I'm not hunting them hunt after hunt, and I'm hanging multiple mock scrapes so I can go that on a move. And I'll get more into the logistics of how I set that up. Cheers. Cold beers and cheers. All right, so typically you're going to want to get your either a vine or a branch. I have problems locating vines on my particular property that almost aren't poison ivy vines, so I just stay away from them. I use like a white oak branch, and I usually use them on a 3/4 inch or an inch in diameter. I don't want something too small, and I don't want something too big. Some people like to use rope to tie it up with, but typically what I use is zip ties. I'll get a handsaw and a rake. A garden rake, I don't have it here with me, but just a small metal garden rake. I've actually broke it off the end of a broomstick so I can fit it in my book bag. But what I'll do is I'll hang that thing. The most important thing is hanging that about belly button or waist high. I've seen a lot of mistakes where guys are hanging them nipple high, and mainly that's what, I don't see them hanging too low, obviously, but normally I see them hanging too high. And I also see the mock scrape branch or vine being too short, which makes it look unnatural. So guys, you're going to want to find a licking branch or just a branch that hangs over and be able to hang that branch on it doesn't necessarily need to be on a deer path. If you can find it on a deer path with your tree, great. I mean, it could be just off that deer path where they're going to hit it and roll through regardless, even if they walk down that deer path. You know, like I said, it's going to direct movement to you and serve as a calling card. Another big important part is you're not going to just want to hang that, and you're going to want to clear the area. And what I mean by that is when a big buck hits it, which is obviously, we're all hunting mature bucks, or if you do have an antelope come through, great, and that's what you're harvesting. But you want a big buck to be able to swing his rear end around anywhere in that mock scrape 360 degrees. So give that room. If you've got to cut little trees around the area out, then do so. If you've got to be able to cut branches that are hanging low off, which that's what I find. I typically find a great tree that's got a lot of branches hanging out below it, and I end up hanging it on a higher branch, and I'm clearing out every branch below the one I just hung it on out. So it's really looking like an attention getter as they're coming through. Let's see here what else I got, boys. You want that pad too, as I've like I told you, on that rake or scraper that you've got. You want that pad to be in 3 to 4 feet in diameter. As you guys have been scouting, you'll probably see scrapes all throughout the area you've scouted, I'm sure, and you'll see them back to back to back. They'll serve probably about the size of a medium or smaller pizza. You want this to be a large or even an extra large pizza. I mean, it needs to be an absolute attention getter as you're coming through. And the biggest reason why that is obviously for visual purposes and scent purposes. They're going to lay down their preorbital gland on that licking branch, and then they're going to lay down their tarsal gland on that ground, which is on the back part of their heels, on that pad. Both of those are going to absolutely stink that area up with their scent. And as another whitetail's coming through, they can't almost help but come through and see who's ran through that area. They'll come through and check it down. And a lot of things, people don't realize this. Deer know what other deer smell like. I mean, and what I'm saying is if Bobby's staying next to Joey knows what Bobby smells like. And you know, when it comes to territorial things, if he doesn't want him in there and he's smelling him, that may just fire him up enough to come right on in there if he's just got done laying down that scrape. So, I mean, it's really important for you to basically create a centralization zone for that, for them to come in. I call it like a red light, green light area. I mean, you don't want to just have, and nothing wrong with hunting regular licking branches, but a buck may come through and hit that licking branch one time, you know, and scrape and move on. It's kind of like a rub. He may just rub here, he may just rub there. Actually, I got a buddy out in Oklahoma. We were just walking his property a couple weeks ago, and before I came back to Illinois, and we seen rub after rub after rub, and this was just all along a bedding area. And that's just very typical. You know, a lot of people, that's an attention getter to them. They're like, oh man, you see these rubs? And a lot of people will just want to straight up right then set up on a rub. But I think it's more about scheming that area down, like I said at the very beginning, walking it and walking it and walking it, and knowing where the point of travel is mainly heavy at. So when you lay that mock scrape down, like I said, they can't help but swing their rear end through there, check it out. And they may not be pawing the ground and, like what I like to say, making a scene or putting on a show. It's not about that. It's not about watching them come up and all bristled up and doing all that, but it's mainly about creating a communal scrape, an annual communal scrape that every month of every year they're going to come through. They may not come through every day, but during certain periods, whether it be the pre-rut or the rut, or just after the rut or in the second rut, they're going to be hammering it. They're going to be coming through and not necessarily, like I said, putting on a show, but coming through, smelling. Is the doe hot? Is the dumb buck Bob here that I don't want around? And those things are important as you start to plan and scheme out your ambush areas. So keep all of that in mind as you sit there and scout your land out. And to be honest, guys, you can have a lot of land. This is what I've learned having the privilege of hunting 1,600 acres. It can kind of be daunting at times because you can have so much land and you hunt where you've seen deer last, or you hunt where you think they're going to be. But the all reality of it is there can almost be on a land that big, if you've really done your scouting and you set up one of these mock scrapes, maybe 6 to 7 areas that you hang a mock scrape and it is just fire. You know, every time you're sitting there, no matter what, you're sitting there, you're going to be within 20 yards of a deer. And that's what's most important, right? Because that's why we're out there. I mean, it is nice to be out in nature, but if you have the time to prepare for that and understand that, you realize that these areas are very finite and you need to treat them like sanctuaries. And speaking of sanctuaries, that's how the deer treat them as well. Like I said, they won't come through and necessarily be bristled up or necessarily be territorial at a time. I've even seen, I have a video trail camera, and I'll dig in my, I don't think I still have the footage, but I'm talking about that pre-orbital gland all the time to you guys about how they touch that on that licking branch and stuff. I've almost seen, and a big buck is so smart on how wide his rack is, where he'll come in, hit that licking branch or hit that mock scrape between his head and rub it right here and right here, and avoid hitting that mock scrape branch or vine with his antlers because he doesn't want to mess that scent up at all. And so, and again, I'm talking about mature bucks, a buck that is, I don't know, 140 and a plus. They'll know that and they won't want to mess that up. They'll want to leave a perfect scent behind of what their presence is, because that's what they're and again, certain time periods, they're trying to establish a territory. So mainly I do see that from the mid-October to Thanksgiving Day, where they'll come in, paw the ground, and lay that scent where they're not necessarily hitting it with their antlers. They're trying to leave as much as they can behind. Another thing is, guys, I never told you about how much there's so much false stuff in this industry. I don't use urine bought from store. I don't use scent spray. And the biggest thing with a mock scrape too, guys, is don't spray urine on this branch that's hanging down. Don't put urine on the branch that's hanging down. Deer don't pee in the air. I mean, that's an absolute dead giveaway, and it's absolutely not natural. The only time they're going to pee in that area is going to be on that pad, and it's going to be on the ground. And I'll be honest with you, you going up there and pouring it on there, you've already used your steps to trace your scent up there to pour it on there. The best thing you can do when you create that area in sanctuary after you've trimmed your shooting limbs so you can get a clear shot, is just walk to your stand, because you want everything natural scent that you can possible. You'll see people pee in scrapes, and I mean, I don't know how much that gets it started, and unless, you know, I mean, I don't even think it really gets it started. I think what gets it started is you being in the right area, number one. And so, like I said, more than anything, putting a lot of that gimmick, I think it's just gimmicky and unnatural. And I mean, especially if we're talking about a 160-inch deer. I mean, you don't want that deer having any sort of unnatural scent. And to be honest with you, the stuff you're going to buy in a Rural King or at Walmart is unnatural. And you're going to spread your own scent trying to spread that scent. So just being informative and treating it like with white gloves in that sense, I think is going to be more proactive in your approach than you would. I think you're going to do more harm than you would good by doing that. Cheers, cold beers. Yeah, one of the things I want to talk about is that they'll walk right in. Once you've got it established, by the way, I mentioned this earlier, you can keep this going for years. I've got mock scrapes that I've had going for 3 years. And the best part about it is when you get it in a travel corridor, just outside of a bedroom, or in a staging area, when you get them on that, they will walk right up to it so quickly you can't get your thoughts together, because they'll walk right up to that scrape and get to making at it. You know, whether it be putting their orbital gland, peeing, rubbing their tarsal gland, and then they'll move on. But that they walk right up to it like a green light or a red light at a traffic area. Another thing I want to go ahead and tell you that I would say avoid: don't use ropes or ribbons, guys. Again, that's about as unnatural as you can get. You'll see people out there that'll hang a rope or a ribbon from a 2x4 in the middle of their food plot, or tie a rope around an oak tree. And still, and a lot of people that do the ropes are the same people. I'm probably stepping on toes by saying this, but I don't care. You know, a lot of people that use the ropes are the same people that'll douse their ropes in scent. And that's, like I said earlier, deer don't pee up, and it's unnatural. Deer, if you're a mature buck and you're alive for 5 to 7 years in these woods, when have you ever come across a rope hanging over a tree? And why are you ever going to use that as your main point of communication? You're probably not. And if you did do it, you done it once. And that was probably when you were hornier than heck in the middle of the rut. And so I wouldn't take your 1 or 2 trail camera pictures that you do have on that rope as fact. That's just, the reality of it is like I said earlier, it looks unnatural. And you're shortcutting yourself. If you're going to go through the hassle of doing all that, why wouldn't you do it in a normal fashion, you know? And think about it. Like, I always joke with my wife when I talk to her about mature bucks. I said, if I could sit a mature buck down and interview him and talk to him in English and say, hey, dude, so what are you seeing out there, you know? Well, I'm seeing, and the buck goes, you know, I'm seeing these guys, you know, the woods don't smell like nothing until October, and then I start smelling all these rednecks coming through. If I were to ask him about a mock scrape, hey, do you prefer a vine or a branch? Or do you prefer a rope or a ribbon? I would imagine if I was talking to a mature buck, that his response would go, yeah, the guy who's laying down the rope's an idiot. I'm never going up to a rope. Who the heck hangs a rope from a tree? Or what rope is hanging from a tree, you know? And that's what we're trying to do, right, is trip them up. If you're trying to trip them up, then by all means, you aren't doing so by hanging a rope from it. And again, I'm sure I'm stepping on all sorts of toes. I'm sure people have killed big bucks off a rope. And good for you. But I'm certain that if I were to, and that may be far and few between, but I'm certain if that, and you can't use the outlier as the example. I'm sure it's more of an anomaly and not necessarily by majority, I guess is what I'm saying. Cheers. Cold beers. Now I just want to dive in. Now that I've kind of laid out how a mock scrape is set up, I want to dive into my experience really over the last 2 years. So I'd say for my first 3 to 4 years hunting, I didn't take this tactic. I didn't. I still killed decent bucks. I killed a couple decent bucks. I got, again, one wall mounter that's down in Oklahoma that was not killed over a mock scrape. It wasn't. And I was privileged enough that it was a rut, and like I said earlier, he happened to run by my tree with a hot doe, you know, and I was ready. I was locked in. And that's great. And it was amazing. But for repetition of being in front of them at a high level and frequency, allowing you to do this is going to allow you to see more deer. And not just this deer, but the one I'll be getting back in 2 weeks, which trumps that one. And I got another one down in Oklahoma that's on the wall. We're all killed in front of mock scrapes. And so in 2022, is when I started this style or scheme of hunting. I got a ton of good pictures of good bucks, even in daylight, you know. just never caught up with them. I'd be at this stand, they'd daylight there. I'd be at that stand and they'd daylight there. But what I'm saying is I was figuring it out. I was like an infant crawling. I could figure out, okay, this works. This is something that I'm not going to stop. Whether I killed a deer this year or not, this works. This is going to be part of my scheme, and this is what I'm going to do moving forward. I'm going to hunt in front of mock scrapes, man. That's what I'm going to do. And I just didn't catch up with a big buck in 2022. That's just the reality of it. I've had the privilege of honestly killing some years multiple big bucks, but that was the only year that I got my tail whipped chasing big mature bucks and didn't get the opportunity to harvest one. But with that being said, I learned the most. Just like in failure, you probably learn far more from failure than you do success. So I learned, I had mock scrapes in wrong places. I had them on field edges, like I mentioned earlier. Now I dove a little deeper into a staging area of that same field, just 30, 40 yards in. I dived right into bedding areas. I've had them right along creek banks, which is fire during the rut if you can get them in a pinch point or a funnel. That's where I was starting to lay my mock scrapes. So now in 2022, I just had them misplaced, I've maybe had one or two that I thought, okay, great, and they're still there. They're still there and hanging on. But of the 5 or 6 that I had hanging, I'd say 3 or 4 of them weren't great. Now going into 2023, since I didn't kill a big buck, I really took my time on finding the correct location. I scouted far more than I can ever imagine. I picked ticks off my body in places that I don't want to describe right now. On a daily basis, every month, every week that I had off, that's what I was doing, was scouting. So come 2023 season, I, for my first time ever, had a deer patterned. I had a deer patterned 30 to 40 yards outside of a bedding area on their way to a shaded corner of a bean field for my first time ever. And I'll flash camera pictures of it down here to the right. But going on again in 2023, come opening day, I hunted on a food plot opening morning that just was terribly planted. I'm not great at food plots, so that was my first experience planting food plots, which you don't want my advice on. I tried it and I hunted it on opening day morning 2023. I'm sure my access was terrible and I had a couple does run by. Anywho, I'm only telling you about that morning because as I'm sitting there in that stand, I'm running trail camera footage on a cell phone camera. I've got 6 or 7 trail cameras that are cell phone cameras. I'm dinging, I'm looking at my phone, and bam, 7:15. 2 studs are hammering it out on my mock scrape on a creek bottom funnel on their way back from a bean field going to bed. And I'm like, oh man, I may think about going there that night. I even thought about it. I just said, I didn't commit that point to going there. I just thought, man, that's nice. That's good to have deer there. I don't want to, it being October 1st, I didn't want to necessarily commit to on these first pictures at 7:15 in the morning, I'm going to be there. So I thought about it, I thought, wow, man, that's good. That's working out, and I had bucks hitting other scrapes too at this point. I mean, I had them, in different areas, but I'm mainly going to talk about this creek bottom funnel specifically, which is in between 2 hills on a creek on the way to the bean field. I mean, it's the most beautiful, ideal location you could ever think of. So I even think I'm about to hunt on top of a ridge, probably 400 or 500 yards down on a pinch point on top of a ridge going down to a bean field. One of my favorite spots, which is good too. I've got plenty of mature bucks on camera there too. I killed last year's big buck. I killed 2 big bucks last year. My second one I killed with a rifle out here on the ridge between the pinch point. But as I'm eating lunch, this probably is about an early season. You don't got to get to the stand about till 4, maybe 4:30, just because the sun's setting 7:30, 7:15. So I'm eating lunch. It's probably 12:30. It's probably closer to 1. I think it's closer to 1. I'm going to flash a picture down here on it. I got a picture. Probably 1. It was around 1. And bam, those same 2 bucks, a 10-pointer and the 8-pointer that I harvested, came back out at 1:15, and they both hammered down the scrapes. I'm eating lunch now. My phone's dinging. I open it up. I'm like, no kidding. I'm thinking, now I'm going. I'm going now, and I have to go quickly because I know that they were just in there, and God forbid they get up any earlier than I would anticipate of last light, which is actually when they got up. Last light, you could barely see. I'll go on and tell you about it here in a second. But I anticipated maybe getting up at 4:30. Who knows? Who knows when they're going? I mean, they hit it at 7. They hit it at 1. They could hit it again at 4 for all I know. I knew they were going to be bedded, and I know where they're bedded. They're bedded on top of the ridge or on this ridge behind me. Again, between 2 hills, and I'm at the bottom of this creek bottom. Well, I get in there about 4:30, sweating my nuts off, by the way, because it's opening day. Hammering mosquitoes, trying to just get in there clean. I took my time getting in, man. I walked in there at 3. I must have hung up, finally set up, probably 4:45. I mean, walked as slow as you could get. I mean, I'm talking about a 150-inch deer, and the 10-pointer is about a 160-inch deer. This is a story for another day, but I shot at that 10-pointer on November 9th and hit him in the scapula at 7 yards, and my arrow came out. Story for another day. I'll tell you about that another day, maybe probably during the rut, because how I killed that deer was completely rut tactics, you know, from a rattling standpoint and all that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But so I get in there. It takes me about an hour and a half because I'm walking so painfully slow, and I'm setting up with my climbing sticks, my tether platform. I'm pulling my bow up. I got to screw in my bow thing. So I am taking my time. So I get in there, set up, and it's 4:30, maybe 4:45, and I waited through. Cheers, by the way, cold beers. And opening day, I had the privilege of killing 2 deer. This buck I'm getting ready to mention, the big 8, and a doe. So I'm sitting there, and a doe comes down the path so I'm sitting there at 4:45 as I'm always set up, and a doe comes down the path, I'd say at about 6:15. I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. I mean, reading the script like a Hollywood rock star. See her coming right east to west, and sure enough, she comes in, hits that scrape, and I smoke her right in front of the scrape. She peels back, goes back where she comes from. I hear her crash. I mean, I hear her crash like a NASCAR accident. I'm like, boom! I'm thinking that's my night. Dude, it's October 1st. Now that I shot this doe, I'm definitely going, well, these boys ain't coming out, you know. And the irony of it, I heard a deer blow probably 10 minutes after that. I'm certain probably just wondering what the hell's going on. From one of these deer on top of the ridge, wondering what the hell's going on in the creek bottom. So that was that. I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh, that's great. Well, come about 6:45, 6:55. Again, I'm terrible on time, and I'll flash the camera of when I got this trail cam pic of the buck, because I shot him, and I have a picture of him 10 seconds before I killed him, probably maybe even 5 seconds before I killed him. But I'm sitting there, and a small 8-pointer comes through at about 6:50, 6:55. I mean, my timing's off on this. I'm not off by but 10 to 15 minutes. Small 8-pointer comes through, and I've got my hand on my bow. I'm like, oh, that's a small boy. So he comes through, and makes the scrape, and then he moves on 5 yards up, maybe 6 yards up, and he's eating acorns right under this white oak. This white oak, by the way, I meant to tell you this, white oak is absolutely raining acorns. So I've got that in my favor. And I'm watching him eat. And at this point, I'm getting the last light. And if you know what last light is, I can barely see my pin. You know, I mean, it's about as dim as it can get, you know. And by the way, I sit in my deer stand until absolute darkness falls for this reason. So, as I'm watching that 8-pointer, I mean, no sooner than I can turn my head right and look back, I see this buck moving at a speed, and he's not running. I want to go back to telling you earlier in my conversation how this bucks will, when there's a mock scrape, and especially if they've used it, they're going to walk right up to it. They're going to walk right up to it like they know it's there and they know what they're doing. So as I look back, he's walking quickly up to this mock scrape, and in my head I hear myself go, grab your bow, pull back. And so as he's hitting this mock scrape, I know that I've got light against me, and as soon as he gets done hitting this scrape, they don't play around. They'll hit this scrape. He may meander here for a couple seconds or two, but he's going to his destination food source, which is that bean field. So as he's hitting that scrape, I no more than pull back, and I'm going through my shot process, which I'm going to make a video of too. Very important if you have target panic, which I did for quite some time. So I roll through my shot process. I get pulled back. I go grip, bubble. I'm focusing on my bubble. And I'm like, crap, I can't see my bubble, man. And I'm like, well, get your pin on it. Get my pin on him. I know my pin's on his heart. And I know for a fact my bubble's cattywampus. And if you know about the bubble and the bow, it's very extremely important to have that bubble level, okay? Well, because I'm fortunate enough to have this mock scrape within 22 yards, which is, by the way, how far I killed him away, 22 yards. I knew my pin was on his heart and my bubble may have not been level, but I thought, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it now and let him have it. And I did. Bam. And as I watched my light not go through, it was just a touch back, but I knew that was a dead deer. I mean, it was double lung, just a touch back. And as I watched him run away, I watched him run up that same ridge I was telling you guys about where he was bedded at, fall over and break some trees. And I'm shaking like a Girl Scout. Man, I'm shaking like a Girl Scout in this thing. But from that point on, it absolutely, I mean, again, I killed this one over a mock scrape, another one that's in Oklahoma, wall mounter I've got over a mock scrape, and this big deer, this 150-inch deer that I'm getting in the next couple weeks I'll have, and you guys will see, over a mock scrape. And fellas, I'm just telling you, if you have time to prepare for it, and you can prep yourself for this, I highly suggest that you do so. It's absolutely changed my hunting career, my tactics on approaching mature whitetail. I know that if you have private land, I almost suggest that this is mandatory in certain areas. Whether it doesn't necessarily have to be in your food plot area or an area where you feed. If you're into feeding deer like that, I'm not. But if you're into feeding deer, I don't know if necessarily you need a mock scrape in that area. But I would consider doing it. One last tip I didn't mention is when you do make a mock scrape, you only want there to be one mock scrape in that area. You don't want another mock scrape competing with another mock scrape competing with another mock scrape. You want that to be centralized in an area where he's coming in and hitting that and moving on. He's not going to think about hitting this one or hitting that one. And another reason for that is you want your camera on that so you can be able to know and time that, But guys, I hope I've been informative on mock scrapes. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for everybody who's subscribed to this point, man. I appreciate you guys following. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do so. I'll be coming at you more with more archery and whitetail content or outdoor stuff. Cheers, boys. Have a good one, fellas. Till next week.